My family excluded me from every holiday. Now they're angry. I started my own traditions. The first few times it happened, I told myself it was an accident, oversight, a mistake. Surely no one forgets to invite their own blood to family festival dinner. No one just forgets to call on Thanksgiving or to mention the annual family gathering that had been going on for decades. It had to be an error, something that slipped their minds in the chaos of holiday planning. But then, it happened again, and again, and again. Each year, the pattern was the same. December would roll around, the stores would glow with twinkling lights, the scent of cinnamon and pine would fill the air, and I would watch from the outside as my family prepared for celebrations that never included me. I'd scroll through social media and see the carefully curated posts, smiling faces gathered around a table loaded with food, presents stacked high beneath a massive tree, laughter frozen in time by the click of a camera. I'd see my parents, my siblings, my cousins, aunts, uncles, even distant relatives I hadn't thought about in years, all together, all happy. And I wasn't even an afterthought. I never got a call, never got a text, not even a lazy "wish you were here" tossed my way in passing. They didn't forget me. No, forgetting would have been an accident. This was deliberate, a decision, a choice they made every single time. I used to cry. I won't lie. Those first few years when I still held on to some naive hope that things would change, I cried more times than I could count. I sat alone in my dimly lit apartment pretending I didn't care, telling myself it didn't matter. I tried to reach out in the early years. I sent messages, I called, I asked if I could visit. And each time, I was met with lukewarm responses, vague excuses, empty reassurances. Oh, it was just a small gathering. You know how chaotic things get. We didn't think you'd want to come. We assumed you were busy. It was always something, some reason, some justification, some weak attempt to make it seem like they weren't deliberately shutting me out. But they were. They always were. And one day, I simply stopped trying. I remember the exact moment the last thread snapped. It was my mother's voice on the other end of the phone, barely disguising her irritation when I asked why no one had invited me to the Thanksgiving dinner that I knew was happening at my parents' house that very moment. I could hear the background noise, the clinking of plates, the murmurs of conversation, the distant echoes of laughter, the sounds of a family I was no longer a part of. "Oh," she said, "I thought someone told you." They didn't. No one did. And she knew it. That was the last time I called. I didn't beg. I didn't argue. I didn't demand an explanation. I simply hung up the phone, sat in my silent, empty apartment, and faced the reality I had spent years trying to deny. They didn't want me there. They didn't care enough to even pretend to include me. So, I let them have what they wanted. For years I spent the holidays alone, but something shifted inside me as time passed. I grew tired of waiting, tired of hoping, tired of staring at my phone, wondering if this would be the year they suddenly remembered I existed. I was done being an afterthought, done lingering on the edges of something I would never be fully welcomed into. And so, I started my own traditions. It began slowly, cautiously, as if I needed to test the waters of my own worth. The first festival, I invited a few friends over, people who, like me, had no family to celebrate with. We cooked a massive dinner together, filling my small apartment with the scent of roasted turkey and freshly baked pies. We drank wine, exchanged small, thoughtful gifts, and laughed over ridiculous holiday movies. There was no tension, no passive-aggressive comments, no forced politeness. Just warmth, just love, just people who actually wanted to be together. The following year, I expanded it. I invited more people, co-workers, neighbors, acquaintances who had no place to go. We built traditions from the ground up. We decorated a tree with mismatched ornaments, each one representing something meaningful to someone in the group. We played board games, stayed up late, and made our own version of a family. A real one, a chosen one. Year after year, the gatherings grew. Thanksgiving, family festival, New Year's fun, each one filled with laughter, joy, and genuine connection. I no longer had to wonder if I was wanted. I no longer had to beg for a seat at a table that never had room for me. I built my own table, and it was overflowing with love. And then something strange happened. The calls started coming. It was subtle at first, A casual message from my sister. "Hey, you weren't at the family festival this year. Everything okay?" Then my father. "Haven't seen you at Thanksgiving in a while. What's going on?" And finally my mother, her voice laced with something between confusion and irritation. "Why didn't you come for festival?" I almost laughed. Why didn't I come? As if I had ever been invited. As if they had ever cared whether I was there or not. But what struck me wasn't just the fact that they were suddenly noticing my absence. It was their anger, their resentment. They weren't just confused about where I had been. They were bothered by it, offended, as if I had personally insulted them by daring to celebrate without them. My mother's voice sharpened when I didn't answer right away. "We saw your pictures." Ah. There it was. They had seen the posts. The photos of my real family. The one I had chosen, laughing, celebrating, toasting to another year of joy and friendship. They had seen the warmth, the happiness, the togetherness. And they didn't like it. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice tight. As if I had done something wrong. As if I was the one who had abandoned them. And I wasn't sad. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't longing for something I could never have. I was just angry. I took a slow breath, gripping the phone tightly, my heart pounding in my chest. This was the moment I could tell them the truth. The moment I could finally say, "You were never there for me. You never wanted me. You made me feel like I didn't belong." So I stopped trying. I stopped waiting. I stopped caring. And now, I have something better, something real. And you don't get to be angry about that. But I didn't say it. Not yet. Because I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to know what it was like to be ignored, to be excluded, to be an afterthought. So, I simply smiled, even though they couldn't see it, and said, "Oh, I thought someone told you." And then I hung up. Silence. Thick, suffocating, and stretching longer than it should have. I could feel it through the phone even before I hung up. The weight of my words sinking in, the confusion twisting into something darker on their end. My mother had been so accustomed to my quiet compliance, to my desperate attempts to fit into a place where I was never truly welcome, that she didn't know how to respond when I finally stopped playing along. For years, I had been the forgotten one, the invisible one, the one who reached out, who tried, who hoped, only to be met with indifference at best and rejection at worst. But now I was the one who didn't care, and that was something they couldn't tolerate. I let my phone rest in my lap for a few moments after the call ended, my fingers drumming absent-mindedly against the screen. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't second-guessing myself. If anything, I felt something close to amusement bubbling under my skin, a sharp-edged satisfaction that came from knowing they were the ones feeling it now. The absence, the exclusion, the sting of knowing someone had moved on without you, that their life had continued, grown, thrived, even when you weren't a part of it. They had done it to me for years. Now, it was their turn. My phone vibrated again, flashing my mother's name across the screen. I watched it for a moment, the little icon shaking as though it were impatient for my response. She wanted answers. I let it ring, then again, and again. By the time the calls finally stopped, I had turned my phone off completely, tossing it onto the couch as I leaned back and exhaled, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the faint golden glow of holiday lights flickered against the window, casting long, soft shadows across the walls. The apartment still smelled like cinnamon and vanilla from the baking we had done earlier, remnants of a celebration that had been filled with nothing but warmth and genuine laughter, the kind of celebration I had never once had with them. I should have been used to this by now. Their sudden attention, their misplaced anger, the way they only seemed to acknowledge me when my absence became inconvenient for them. But something about this time was different. Maybe because I wasn't the same person anymore. Once, I would have jumped at the first sign of interest from them. I would have clung to the scraps of attention they offered, convinced that this was the moment things would change, that they would finally see me, that I would finally be enough. But now, I knew better. I had spent too many holidays alone, too many years watching them gather without me, to believe that their sudden concern was anything but selfish. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they didn't like what they saw, because the idea of me being happy without them was something they couldn't stomach. And honestly, that was their problem, not mine. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I didn't need to guess who it was. I pushed myself up from the couch, stretching slightly before moving to open the door. The second it swung open, I was met with a gust of cold winter air and the warm, familiar grin of Elliot. "Figured you'd be up," he said, stepping inside and shaking the snow from his jacket. "You disappeared after dinner. Everything good?" I hesitated for a moment, then exhaled. "Yeah, just family stuff." Elliot's expression shifted, his jaw tightening slightly. He knew. He always knew. "You want to talk about it?" "Not really." "Fair enough." He didn't push. He never did. That was the thing about Elliot. He understood. Maybe because he had been through something similar, maybe because he had seen enough of my past to know exactly how deep those wounds ran. Either way, he didn't ask me to explain. He just nodded, moving past me and heading straight for the kitchen, where the remnants of our festival feast were still scattered across the counters. "You want some pie?" he asked, already grabbing a plate. "I mean, we made like 5 of them. Pretty sure it's legally required that we eat the leftovers." A small laugh escaped me before I could stop it. This was why I had stopped waiting for my real family to love me, because I had already found people who did. "Yeah," I said, closing the door behind me. "Pie sounds good." The next day I turned my phone back on. The notifications flooded in immediately. Texts, missed calls, voicemails. I didn't check them right away. I let them sit, let the weight of them linger without urgency, because I wasn't scrambling to know what they wanted. I wasn't desperate for their attention. I took my time. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and let the world outside slowly come to life before. Finally, I decided to see what they had to say. The texts were predictable. "Mom, I don't understand why you didn't come. We've always celebrated together." A lie. "Dad, your mother is upset. Call her back." "Ah, so it wasn't about me." "It never was." "Sister, what's with the attitude? You could have at least let us know you weren't coming." As if they had ever given me the same courtesy. The voicemails weren't much different. My mother's voice laced with irritation, my father's brief and emotionless, my sister's vaguely accusatory. It was the same tone they had always taken with me, the same dismissive edge that told me they still didn't see what the real problem was. They weren't upset that I had been alone all these years. They weren't remorseful for shutting me out. They weren't even sorry for forgetting me. They were just angry that I had stopped waiting for them. I set my phone down, rubbing a hand over my face as a slow, quiet laugh escaped me. It wasn't even funny. Not really. But there was something so utterly predictable about all of it that I couldn't help but find amusement in their sheer obliviousness. They still thought they had a right to me. That despite everything, despite the years of neglect, despite the silence, I still owed them my presence. That they were the ones who had been wronged. And that was almost laughable. I stood up, stretching slightly before grabbing my phone again, this time to send a single text, a simple, clear message, one that would make them understand exactly where they stood now. "Me, I thought someone told you." And then, just like before, I turned my phone off, because I had better things to do. I was the one ignoring them. And it was glorious. It was funny in a way. How quickly the dynamic had shifted. For years they had been the ones leaving me in the dark, letting my calls go unanswered, my messages unread. And I had always felt it. That creeping sense of loneliness, that aching need to be acknowledged, that quiet, insidious voice whispering, maybe they just forgot. Maybe next year will be different. But now the silence wasn't my burden to carry anymore. Now, they were the ones waiting, and I wanted them to feel every second of it. By the time I turned my phone back on 2 days later, the flood of unread messages had doubled, missed calls, unread voicemails, notifications stacking like a desperate, frantic pile of evidence that my absence had finally sunk in. I scrolled through the text slowly, sipping my coffee as I took in the shift in tone. At first, it had been confusion. "Mom, why didn't you answer me?" "Dad, your mother is getting really upset." "Sister, are you mad or something?" Then, irritation. "Mom, It's really childish to ignore your own family. Dad, enough with the attitude. Call your mother. Sister, what is your problem? And now? Desperation. Mom, just talk to me, please. Dad, I don't know what you want from us. Sister, are you really going to let the family fall apart over this? That one almost made me laugh, as if I was the one who broke us in the first place. For years, I had been an afterthought, an inconvenience, the one they could easily forget, dismiss, leave behind without a second glance. And now, when I had finally stopped trying, when I had moved on, they suddenly had the audacity to act like I was the problem. I set my phone down, stretching my legs out beneath the table as I let out a slow breath. The coffee in my mug had gone lukewarm, but I didn't care. I was too busy reveling in the strange, exhilarating sense of power that came with knowing they needed me now. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about regret. It was about control. For years, I had been the one clinging, the one waiting, the one hoping. They had been comfortable in their indifference, knowing that no matter how many times they ignored me, I would always be there. But now I wasn't playing along anymore, and that terrified them. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I frowned, standing slowly as I moved toward the door, my heart hammering in my chest with a mixture of unease and anticipation. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friends had all gone home after our celebration, and Elliot had left late last night, promising to swing by later in the week. So, who the hell was knocking at my door? I peered through the peephole, and immediately felt my stomach turn. No way. I hesitated for only a moment before unlocking the door and pulling it open. There, standing on my doorstep, bundled in an expensive winter coat, her expression somewhere between anxious and annoyed, was my mother. She looked different, older, more fragile than I remembered. Maybe it was the years, or maybe it was just the fact that I had stopped looking at her through the lens of a desperate, neglected child. But whatever it was, it didn't change the sharp, twisting ache in my chest at the sight of her. She wasn't supposed to be here. She had never come looking for me before. And yet, here she was. I didn't speak right away. I just leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms as I watched her shift uncomfortably under my gaze. Finally, she let out a breath. You didn't answer my calls. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't realize I had to. She frowned, her lips pressing into a thin line. You don't have to be like this. Like what? Like someone who finally stopped begging for scraps of affection? Like someone who had learned to value themselves enough to walk away from people who never really wanted them? I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. She sighed, rubbing a hand over her face. Look, I know you're upset. That made me laugh, a short, sharp sound that felt more bitter than anything else. You know I'm upset, I repeated, shaking my head. Mom, you haven't given a damn about my feelings for years. Her eyes flashed with something. Hurt? Guilt? I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't care. She exhaled slowly. You should have been there for festival. A cold, quiet fury settled in my chest. Should have been there? Should have been there? I stared at her, trying to process the sheer audacity of her words. I should have been there? I repeated, my voice deadly calm. Are you actually serious right now? She flinched slightly but held her ground. It's tradition, she said. Family is important. The laugh that bubbled up in my throat was sharp, cutting, filled with years of pain and frustration. Oh, now it's important. Now it suddenly matters. Where was all this concern when I was sitting alone year after year, wondering if you even remembered I existed? She looked away, lips pressing together as if she had nothing to say to that. Because she didn't. She knew what they had done. She knew how many times they had forgotten me, ignored me, left me behind. And now, she had the nerve to stand here and act like I was the one who had abandoned them. I took a slow step forward, watching as she shifted uncomfortably. I spent years waiting for an invitation that never came, I said, my voice steady, firm. Years hoping that maybe, just maybe this time, you'd remember me. And you never did. Not once. And now that I've finally stopped waiting, now that I've built something for myself, something better, you suddenly care. She swallowed hard. We didn't mean to hurt you. That should have made me feel something. Anger, relief, vindication. But all I felt was exhaustion. You did, though, I said quietly. You did, and you never once tried to fix it. You only care now because you don't like the idea of me being happy without you. Her mouth opened slightly as if she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just stood there, looking lost, looking small in a way I had never seen before. And maybe if this had been years ago, I would have caved. Maybe I would have softened, let her back in, given her another chance to hurt me. But I wasn't that person anymore, and she didn't deserve that chance. I took a slow breath. I have plans today. Her eyes widened slightly, like she hadn't expected that. Oh, well, maybe I can... No, she blinked. What? I met her gaze, my voice calm but unwavering. No, I repeated. You don't get to be a part of this. You don't get to show up after all these years and expect me to just forget everything you put me through. She looked like she wanted to argue, like she wanted to fight, to insist that she was still my mother, that I still owed her something. But I didn't. Not anymore. I took a step back, gripping the edge of the door, and then I shut the door in her face. For a long time after I shut the door, I just stood there. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. My hand still gripped the doorknob, the cold metal biting into my palm as if my body refused to believe what I had just done. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, heavier than I had anticipated. I had imagined this 1,000 times before, telling my mother exactly how I felt, laying it all out, making her understand just how much damage she had done. And yet, now that it had happened, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt... done. She hadn't knocked again. She hadn't called my name through the door, hadn't pleaded for another chance. Maybe she had known, deep down, that this was it. That there was no coming back from this. No more excuses, no more manipulations. Or maybe she still thought I would cave. That was the thing about people like her. They never truly believed they could lose control. They pushed and pushed, confident that the other person would always stay, always need them. But I didn't need her. Not anymore. With a slow exhale, I forced my fingers to unclench, letting go of the doorknob as I turned away. The apartment was quiet, the remnants of my new life scattered across the space. The half-eaten pie Elliot had left behind, the empty wine glasses from last night's gathering, the cozy blanket draped over the couch from when we had all curled up and watched terrible holiday movies together. This was my home now. Not the house I grew up in. Not the family who had never made space for me. This, here. And I wasn't going to let them take it away from me. I picked up my phone from the coffee table, my unread messages still waiting for me like ghosts from a past I no longer belonged to. The missed calls from my mother, the texts from my father and sister, the desperate attempts to reel me back in. I hovered over my mother's name for a moment, my thumb twitching slightly as if some part of me still wanted to answer. But I knew how this would go. She would try to guilt me. She would twist the narrative, make herself the victim, tell me how much I was hurting her by standing my ground. She would say all the right words, words that might have worked on me once, words that had kept me trapped in that cycle for years. But words without actions meant nothing, and I was done listening to empty promises. I swiped to the right and blocked her number. Then I did the same for my father, and then finally, my sister. It was easy, too easy. With just a few taps they were gone, silenced, cut off from me the same way they had cut me off for years, and I felt light. I set the phone down, letting out a slow, measured breath. My hands weren't shaking, my heart wasn't racing. There was no guilt, no second guessing, no lingering sadness. Just peace, just freedom. A knock at the door startled me, my pulse jumping for half a second before I realized it wasn't the hesitant, guilt-ridden knock of a mother who had come to plead her case. No, this was different, lighter, familiar. I walked over and opened the door without hesitation. Elliot stood there, 2 cups of coffee in hand, his eyes scanning my face as if he already knew something had happened. "Did she show up?" he asked, not bothering with a greeting. I nodded. "Yeah." His lips pressed together. "And?" I exhaled, stepping aside to let him in. He handed me one of the coffees, watching me carefully as I took a slow sip, letting the warmth seep into my hands. "And," I said finally. I shut the door in her face. A slow grin spread across his face. "Good for you." I huffed out a small laugh, shaking my head. "You don't think that was too much?" "Not even a little." He sat down on the couch, stretching his legs out as he took a sip of his own coffee. "They don't deserve a single second of your time. If they wanted you in their lives, they should have acted like it before now." He was right. I knew he was right. But hearing someone else say it, it made it real. I sank down beside him, my shoulders finally relaxing as I let my head fall back against the cushions. I blocked them, I admitted. Elliot whistled low. "Damn, you really did it." "Yeah," I murmured. "I really did." Silence settled between us, but it wasn't heavy. It wasn't filled with regret or lingering doubt. It was comfortable, steady, the kind of silence that only existed between people who truly knew each other. After a moment, Elliot nudged me lightly with his elbow. "So," he said, "what's next?" I thought about that for a moment. For years, my life had been defined by the absence of something, by the aching, endless need to belong. I had spent so much time chasing after a love that would never be given to me, trying to fix something that had never really been whole to begin with. But now, I wasn't missing anything. I had a family, a real family, a family that had chosen me just as I had chosen them. A family that didn't make me beg for their time or their love. I had a home, a life, happiness. I had everything I needed. I smiled, turning to face Elliot as I took another sip of my coffee. "Now," I said, "now I start living." And for the first time in my life, I truly meant it.